Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 17 years of profiling excellence in government IT mission programs. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss progress being made in cloud computing programs within the Department of Defense and Homeland Security agencies. With me on today's show are Paul Puckett, Director of Enterprise Cloud Management Agency, U.S. Army; Shane Barney, Chief Information Security Officer, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services; Dr. Mark Lucas, Director, Cloud Computing Operations, Department of Homeland Security; Louis Copland, Department of the Navy CIO, Department Deputy Chief Technology Officer; Jonathan Albom, Federal Chief Technology Officer at ServiceNow; David Kelly, Technology Fellow, Deloitte Consulting; and Yvonne Chung, Senior Director, Solutions Architect, Red Hat North American Public Sector. We have a lot of horsepower on this panel. Paul, we're going to start with you. Once upon a time, you were in office. Now you're an agency. You've been on that journey for now, I guess, almost 2 years, year and a half plus. Tell us about the state of all the great work going on at the Army.
Absolutely, Luke, and thanks for having me. Time flies. We're actually just about to hit 3 years since the Enterprise Cloud Management Office was first stood up, now in the agency. And that happened in January of 2021. Because we shifted the strategy from a kind of a point in time thing, being more of a management top-down way of doing business in the then CIO G6. And now it's an agency executing real-time services for the Army. We see the criticality when it comes to the adoption at scale. And so we also see the enduring need for the capability as well. We've done a number of things in the last 3 years, most notably with the stand-up of C Army. We pushed for, hey, we need to have a multi-tenant secure environment in which essentially any customer of the United States Army can deploy their system into the cloud. Because prior to C Army, everyone was just kind of doing it on their own. And so that's been live now for 2.5 years. So a lot of great news, success stories coming out of there. The first, the ERPs we've talked about many times, but now over 150 systems working through the process of the CMET process, just about to hit 100 customers that are actually building or also operational and live within the environment itself. And we're also moving and have been moving for the last year for the adoption of OCONUS Cloud. And so how we actually field cloud computing capabilities, OCONUS, to support predominantly a number of exercises that we've had leveraging our mission command systems. And so we moved on this idea of a tactical cloud about a year ago, born out of the 101st Division, led by 18th Airborne Corps, and really kind of taken to scale, if you will, across each one of the corps now. And so we've got 18, 1st, 3rd, and 5th Corps that are all using cloud computing for mission command. And what that's done is it's created a new feedback loop for really requirements. And we've talked about this a lot in the federal space of, we kind of get requirements wrong. And really my point to the team has always been the lead time for how feedback is gathered from the actual field before it becomes a hard requirement, funded, and then delivered just takes entirely too long. And so establishing quick feedback loops between Forces Command, as well as PEO C3T, the people building these capabilities for mission command, and then quickly fielding it with cloud computing has shown immense value. And so we're now taking that to scale. And then finally, just a few other good news stories is how we're able to leverage the capacity and scale of the cloud to support the total Army is in the past has always been a hardware challenge and a geographic location challenge. And we're now live for when it comes to delivering Google Workspace. So we ensure that all soldiers have emails, so we can deprecate the old Defense Enterprise email solution. But we've also moved on our Bring Your Own Device project. So anyone with a mobile device can have access to secure information all the way up to impact level 5. And what this has done is truly democratized our abilities to use any type of equipment that we have, whether it's yours or whether it's government furnished, for people to be able to do their job. And then we're leaning into that even further with delivering virtual desktop for the entire Army, currently in user acceptance testing. And so I learned a lot from like what Louis and the Navy has done, but taking it to scale for the entire Army and truly trying to empower our soldiers, civilians, with the actual capabilities that they need and lowering the barrier to entry when it comes to doing their job. And we just see the online on-demand capacity of cloud computing just continually to demonstrate value and being an enabler of that. So a number of really good things that we've been moving on in the last 3 years.
A lot of great capability being embraced globally. Very interesting and very exciting. Shane, how about over at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services? You all have been an early adopter of a variety of technologies, embracing the cloud, multi-cloud, et cetera. Tell us about the status to where you all are these days.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Luke. It's great to be here. USCIS, we jumped into the cloud feet first, hardly even looking at what we were doing over 10 years ago now. Learned a lot of fun, hard lessons along the way. Still learning, actually. But what I can say, as I look back now, and especially as I look at our environment today, we've made a lot of good choices as well. And a lot of those lessons that we learned weren't necessarily painful lessons per se, but they were just good things that we've learned along the way that really have made our cloud journey successful. And now I look at our enterprise, we're probably 95% cloud-based, probably maybe even more. We are in different cloud environments now. We're actually in 3 different cloud environments at this point. So we've really seen the utility and the value of it. All of our major business applications are cloud-based, and we've definitely seen the value add there. And we continue to leverage that technology. We continue to push the envelope and looking for new and innovative ways to solve our mission problems. Immigration is a complex, data-heavy, still rather paper-intensive process. And we're looking to solve that. We're looking to ensure that as we go forward, that you can submit and apply for any immigration benefit via the internet. And we want to make that accessible. We want to make sure that the people that we serve throughout the world, literally throughout the world, have that capability. We recognize there's always going to be some element of paper. It's the nature of the business. But at the same time, we want to have the in-house capabilities to either digitize that and make that accessible to our officers who are doing the adjudications in the field or around the world. We want to put the technology in the hands of our refugee officers and our asylum officers who are working, literally on the ground, sometimes in some really terrible locations, to be able to not only give them the ability to capture the information and data that we need, but also to be able to make decisions when they're there and on the ground. It is something we've never really been able to accomplish in the past, and it's something we're really striving towards. And I think the next real big thing for us, I know we'll probably get into this later, is on the biometrics front, and then really trying to figure out, what is that next step look like on the biometric side, and how, not only just how we capture it, but how we leverage it.
Love the idea of introducing this new technology and focusing on that customer experience. That's fantastic.
Yep, absolutely.
Always good to talk to you, Shane. Dr. Lucas, you're at the department level, 250,000 plus employees, a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different operating components. Give us a state of the status to what the inner workings are there across the department and organizing and structuring all this great capability.
Yeah, a lot of work going on, Luke. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show. Great to be among these distinguished panelists here. One of the things we're excited about, Luke, here at Homeland Security is our cloud security gateway solution. We did a proof of concept early this year for a solution that not only helps us implement zero trust, and micro-segmentation of architectures, but it also allows us to gain visibility across our hybrid compute environment, which is our co-location facilities, on-premises locations, and our cloud service provider environments. We're in multiple clouds as well. And that visibility gives us not only the operational visibility to improve the operations of the support for these critical missions that we have going on, but also helps us to respond to and mitigate any cybersecurity threats that we may have globally. That cloud security gateway solution, Luke, does give us many abilities to include IoT traffic analysis, data loss prevention analysis, and feedback to our organization. But it also provides us with the ability to do geo-tracking and give us the ability to see our assets in real time across the world, which is a game changer for us. Second, it's a part of that, and further on with that, we have now visibility across our hybrid compute environment, much more so than we've ever had. We're using both cloud-based tools and some legacy tools that we have, and some cutting-edge technology to give us visibility and ability to respond quickly to any threats or operational impacts that we have. Next, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention our Network Operations Security Center. Because we've had the awesome ability, based on some leadership guidance, to implement a combined network operations and security center into one cohesive organization. as a part of that, Luke, we've decided to implement cloud computing into that solution as well, and that architecture, which gives us the ability to improve cloud computing awareness across our hybrid compute environment, or whether it's in a hybrid configuration or whether it's cloud-based native. So, and then last but not least, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention what's in the public sphere as well. We exited successfully out of our tier 3 data center in Southern Virginia, and we were able to effectively migrate 64% of our systems either to cloud native solutions in the cloud or a hybrid based configuration. So we've done a lot here at Homeland Security. We're really proud of what we're doing, especially given the fact that we're supporting the critical missions that we have going on. So really proud to be a part of that and helping out where we can.
Such complex missions, FEMA, Coast Guard, Secret Service, TSA, et cetera. And love that NOSC concept. I think that was actually adopted from the military. Speaking of which, Lewis, let's get a state of the state from the Navy. I know there's a lot of activity going on over there.
There is. Good afternoon. When I came on board as the deputy CTO a few years ago now, one of the first things I was asked to do was help modernize the Department of the Navy's cloud policy. And really the point there was to say, cloud isn't new. Cloud isn't something we're dipping a toe into. It's, the third decade of the 21st century. That's table stakes. Cloud is at the center of how we think about these things. And we're past crawl, we're past walk, we're running. So we signed that out in December of 2020. But, what does that actually mean? Because we've all labored under the scourge of lift and shift. And digital transformation really is not a technology problem, it's a culture problem, or as one of our folks likes to say, IT is easy except for the people. So the question was, how are we going to change the technology culture? Because bringing the right tools to the table is necessary but not sufficient. FedEx is going to be great at logistics, regardless of if they're on Excel or a Kubernetes microservices mesh. So we've been really focusing on that culture problem at the CIO level. And just in September, Aaron Weiss, our CIO, signed out a capstone design concept for information superiority. We have an information superiority vision that the Secretary of the Navy signed. And this says, well, culturally speaking, how are we going to shift the way we think about technology solutions to realize information superiority? We said, there are a few things. We really want to elevate customer experience as a key outcome. We really want to elevate operational resilience as a key outcome. That whatever your requirements of record are, those two are going to swamp it in practice. When we all go remote for COVID, when no one's looking at the paperwork from 7 years ago to figure out what your key performance parameters are. They're saying, is it there? Is it still there? Can I use it to get my job done? And to get after that, we outlined 3 lines of effort. Again, making sure necessary but not sufficient. We need to actually optimize our information enterprise for cloud. We need to adopt enterprise services because we just can't have every team going off and starting from scratch with a blank piece of paper and saying, first I'll get some compute and store, and then I'll figure out some business process workflows. And we really need to implement zero trust because that's a game changer for those 2 key outcomes of customer experience and operational resilience. And we've seen some really big success over the last couple of years, especially with flank speed for the Navy, which is our Microsoft 365 environment, but also the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service tiers. So that's something where we now have 500,000 people operating in a tenant that's got many pretty advanced zero trust features turned on, that's got information protection implemented, that's allowing access from personal devices over personal network connections, where our cyber defenders have very dynamic and granular and conditional ability to fine-tune those accesses. And that's, as Mr. Weiss said just recently, it's really just the door we went through. Now we can have the conversation about, well, what's the ratio of end user devices we need to virtual desktops? What are the different virtual desktop, the evergreen virtual desktop images that we can tailor by persona? Software developers, or maybe a shipyard artisan who doesn't need to do anything except enter time and attendance. And so where our focus is now is not trying to scale some of these things up, because Agile doesn't really scale up, but how can we decompose our problems, really empower teams to stop doing things that don't add value and let them take ownership and run with these solutions.
A lot of moving parts going on there at a global scale. And I think about all the capability across these bases, the ships, et cetera. Daunting task. Jonathan, you're in a unique situation there where you're seeing all this across these various agencies adopt these various technologies, all the way from just sort of lift and shift to SaaS as a service to citizen services, et cetera. Give us the state of the state from where you see it.
Sure. Thanks, Luke. We've heard some great use of cloud already. I want to talk about some mission use cases that ServiceNow is involved in across the agencies that we've already talked about. We're doing things like investigative case management. We're supporting immigration at the Air Force. We're doing work to support airman readiness. So there's a number of mission use cases like that are using cloud technologies, including ServiceNow. And it's exciting to be a part of that. One of that I wanted to dive into a little more deeply is around the solution that we worked with, that we helped the Army create for housing. So, if you go back to the origins of this project, soldiers and their families were having challenges with Army managed housing. There could be maintenance issues. There could be other challenges in maintaining that home. And it was a very complicated paper-based process to get those issues corrected. We worked with the Army to deploy a workflow on ServiceNow using our customer workflows and also field service management capabilities in order to make it very simple for soldiers and their families to support maintenance issues with their homes. Using a phone, they could just simply take a picture of something that's wrong and send it into a central office that could dispatch a person to repair that problem and get that home back in shape very quickly. That's where we started. We expanded it to what we call fence to fence, where and I think that we moved to fence to fence in just 3 months after the initial deployment, where any garrison resource can create a request for anything it may be problematic, whether it was a building or it was a road, it was a fence, whatever it was. So, we're using a cloud technology like ServiceNow to make it very easy for people to have problems resolved. And I think it was deployed very quickly. It was something that was adopted very quickly. I think in the first year we had close to 50,000 people using this. 200,000 requests were submitted. And so, we can see a really terrific use case where suddenly a system that may have been paper-based, where the workflows were unmanaged at times, now there's great tracking and visibility, and people can be served very quickly, and they can get what they need to focus on things that are most important, their families, their mission. So it's, I think, a tremendous story.
And no question that you're able to deploy it securely and certainly able to deploy it in a sort of a mobile fashion type thing.
I was going to say it runs an impact level 4 environment. ServiceNow is creating an impact level 5 capability for our customers for other kinds of cloud requirements. So, it's very exciting to be part of ServiceNow and work on these projects today.
Sounds fantastic, and I'm sure the Air Force is greatly appreciative of that. And we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about cloud computing at Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security. And David, I'm going to throw it over to you. Deloitte's in a unique situation there where they're working with a variety of agencies on a variety of technologies, including all kinds of cloud service providers, et cetera. Give us a state of the state from where you stand and what you're seeing out there.
Sure.
Your customers are asking you to implement.
So I'm a software architect by training and work. So I spend most of my time working with our customers on how they're using the cloud, right? In terms of designing software systems, cloud native, those kinds of things. Theme for the day, I think, and the theme for the year that I've seen is platforms. Enterprises are moving to They want to use the SaaS platforms and the PaaS platforms that are being, Jonathan just described ServiceNow's and the use cases he's building out in ServiceNow. The use of many of those platforms, whether that's ServiceNow or Appian or Salesforce or whatever, is very valuable to agencies. There are potential issues with that, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to design software architectures to help agencies kind of prevent those issues, particularly around stovepipes, for lack of a better word, right? There's a word from way back when, right? So as I'm putting business functions into Salesforce and I'm putting business functions into ServiceNow and I'm putting business functions in these other platforms, how do I get kind of a holistic view of the things that are happening across them from my enterprise's perspective? So we talk to clients about, having them define what are the important business events and important business data that is being created and manipulated in these platforms, and having some sort of kind of technology that they can get the exhaust from those platforms or the telemetry out of those platforms into a single kind of view of what's happening across their enterprise. So once they're able to do that, then they can, it's easy to adopt another one when it comes out, or it's easy to say, hey, this use case that we're talking about belongs in ServiceNow or belongs in Salesforce based upon, those systems capabilities. The second kind of platforms that we're talking to customers about is really when we get the question of, hey, how do I stay agnostic? I'm going to air quote that across CSPs and across cloud.
Avoid the lock-in, right?
The lock-in, yeah. And I don't know, we'll see over time how much of an issue that actually is. But what we're starting to see and we're starting to recommend users is to stick with open platforms. And what do I mean by that? I mean things like a Kubernetes runtime environment or a Kafka integration environment. The reason being is that things that you build and you put in those environments can run in any Kubernetes or any Kafka environment. Mm-hmm. And when I go to the cloud service providers, AWS, Azure, Google, all I want them to do is run the cluster for me. So you look at them and say, hey, just give me a Kubernetes cluster and I can build my app on top of that. And now I'm reasonably comfortable that if I want to get out of this cloud service provider and go to that cloud service provider, or I want to go across many of the cloud service providers, the software that I build and the systems that I build are able to run on those platforms.
Absolutely. And speaking of open, Yvonne, I would say that Red Hat was part of that open journey very early on as we all went on this cloud computing journey. Tell us about the state of the state at this point. You all are doing a lot of different things over there. Started as sort of this open shift Lego block kind of environment. You've moved yourself way up the value chain these days.
Well, Luke, it was great to hear all of our distinguished government speakers talk about their cloud adoption and the desire to be hybrid. In particular, Shane, because I've personally worked very closely with DHS over my career, and USCIS, they are absolutely innovators in the cloud. In government, and they have a ton of hard-won experiences, developed a great pragmatic approach to cloud that could easily be made agnostic across cloud vendors. So really great to hear their story and the progress they've made over the past decade. Now, obviously, the DoD has never had the luxury to be able to think of cloud as just one thing, right? One vendor, but also just, one delivery mechanism. So they deploy in the most challenging circumstances in the world. And so they've always had to think outside of the box. To your point, Red Hat's goal has always been to support the notion of open hybrid cloud by making sure that Red Hat Enterprise Linux is a first-class citizen in every vendor's cloud implementation. Linux is really, truly the foundation of the cloud. And also with, an agnostic approach to everything. So automation technologies like Ansible, which can automate regardless of what technology you're trying to connect with, and also with its CNCF compliant Kubernetes implementation, that's OpenShift. So that runs across every infrastructure infrastructure type from cloud to edge. Tactical edge with cloud capability delivered at OCONUS is really a big priority for Red Hat to figure out how we support our customer in that fashion. But we've also partnered with all the cloud vendors in JWCC to help facilitate the procurement of Red Hat technologies in cloud marketplaces. So both pay as you go as well as reserved instance. So try to lower the barrier to entry for adoption for some of these agencies. And to David's point about open platforms, we are working especially closely with both AWS and Microsoft to provide jointly managed services. And these offerings for the Kubernetes platforms are at different classification levels to support both the DoD and DHS mission.
So important, and that's a delicate balance, and very interesting concepts there that have turned into real world implementation. So we certainly do appreciate everything that Red Hat has done for the community. Dr. Lucas, I'm going to ask you, we always like to talk about a specific program that you'd like to shine a light on, where you've taken some of this technology and sort of unlock some capability there. You want to bring one of those to our attention?
Yes, sir. And it's always great to give credit where credit's due, Luke, especially to the amazing work that both federal employees and contractors are doing for Homeland Security. So, I mentioned previously that the migration out of our data center, where we moved the majority of our workloads to cloud service provider environments. So as a part of that, that was in part successful because of some foundational work that our organization has done to set up a program that we now call Headquarters Cloud that gives us the ability to allow application rationalization, meeting with stakeholders, and effective migration to whatever cloud service provider environment that they need to go to based on the risks and a number of things in the decision-making process. So that gave the stakeholders the option, one option for migrating from our data center to the cloud. And as a result of that entity, here at headquarters, that has improved automation capabilities. There's constant innovation that's happening, DevOps pipelines, and numerous other things that I can mention on this call. Improved communication with both stakeholders and system owners. Improved IT management practices because, as we move from waterfall to agile project management, especially with the sort of things that we do here at Homeland Security, we're able to improve upon those things and improve upon cybersecurity. And last but not least, Luke, I'd like to mention, so one of the things that we've seen, and we know that cloud computing is very complex, especially with the migration. And so what we're doing now is we're creating a combined portal to create an abstraction layer, to use an overused industry term, for the users that want to come into the cloud, so that they can have a one-stop shop, so that improve communication. So whether it's a CIO across the department, or it is a subject matter expert hands-on keyboard, that person knows exactly where to go, what to do, and that increases our collaboration and ability to communicate to the stakeholders. So the Headquarters Cloud is a big piece. Shout out to all the team because they're doing a wonderful job. But that's just one of the many programs that we're working on here at Homeland Security.
Very delighted to hear that. Jonathan, how about at ServiceNow? You highlighted one. I know you've got dozens there. Give us an example of one that you'd like to shine the light on.
Well, speaking more, comprehensively, Luke, I think that the question that always comes back to me, and having been a CIO for a long time, these technologies that we're talking about, how are we using them to drive the mission forward? And I look at what the administration's talking about from customer experience, and the question that always comes is, will this technology advance the mission? And from a customer experience perspective, will it make it easier for someone to interact with the government? Will it make it easier in the immigration case that was mentioned earlier, for someone to apply for a visa? Will it make it simpler for someone at an Army base to report an issue with mold or something like that? So when I think about it from that frame, I really think about the key elements to this. And so much of it is understanding not just the mission, but how does the work and the data flow through the organization in order to get an outcome. And some of the hardest use cases that we're working on at ServiceNow have really complex workflows, especially in the immigration space. And oftentimes those workflows cut across multiple agencies, and but at the almost almost universally, it's the same person or similar class of individuals is being impacted by different agencies. So really being able to work across those agencies and understand those multi-agency workflows and how someone is interacting with the government is at the core of so many of the projects that ServiceNow is doing. And we like to position ServiceNow as a platform of platforms, if you will, as a connective tissue across these agencies and workflows. So the data can be connected and someone who's interacting in one place has a consistent experience when they interact in another place. And I think that's one of the real benefits of having a SaaS platform that can rise up above an individual agency's architecture and individual agency's technology stack, because we can reposition this in a way where multiple organizations can interact and have the requirements implemented. So we're doing things like that across the DoD and across the DHS space, and those are key projects for our company.
That level of, I'll repeat the word extraction there. That's
a great word.
It's really important where you're stitching all these things together. Paul, you top-lined a lot of activity that is going on at the Army, and it's just daunting to think about the global footprint and the scale that you all are operating at is impressive. Give us an example of one program you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, from a scale perspective, I typically push back on scale and say, hey, we need to have quality first. Like each one of the things that we've talked about that's scaling, right, has started somewhere that showed value. I'll probably lean in honestly with the mission command work, and I'll hit like maybe a different aspect of what it's done for us that truly opens up the opportunity for scale. If you look at the Army, the way that we've addressed scale in the past is everyone gets a big piece of hardware and everyone has to do it. We'll typically field 428 systems that support mission command capabilities. When we talk about our ability to scale, what we saw was every single corps and division had visibility with a actual COP, right? When it came to how they were maneuvering with an exercise that we did just about 9 months ago, simply because of their ability to have network connectivity to a persistent capability running in the cloud. And so I think there's a little bit of a different kind of viewpoint of scale that we need to be looking at when it comes to capability. Is typically the Army and scale is a people and a bit of hardware thing, whereas scale now is a connectivity to information thing, right? The more that you can actually create a mechanism by which people can communicate and collaborate, you're truly addressing scale, even perhaps with a single instance running that's simply designed, to handle the actual load, if you will. The same was even seen when we talk about people with CVR, right? Going all the way back to the start of COVID. And I think this is what opened people's eyes when it came to cloud computing is simply my ability to give you connectivity from a personal device allowed you to be part of the team. Whereas you physically coming to an environment and being able to log into government furnished equipment, or you physically being issued a laptop in order to connect and share, those are long lead times, and those are high constraints. Those are also things that force us to predict the future, right? We want to get the greatest discount possible when we make big bulk hardware purchases. And what that forces us to do is to imagine a future of how many people need access or how many things need to connect. And we typically get that wrong. And so I think the value for something like Mission Command as a service is even with a single instance running designed to handle the load, we had the scale and support of an entire corps and its divisions when it came to actually being able to operate within an exercise. And I think it's a better vignette of scale because it changes the dynamic for literally every single system that we can possibly field. Think how many one-off local deployments exist at every single data center to run something in a data center where connectivity is an imperative, and you can actually host that as a web-based service for all to consume. You've now essentially broken down the complexity that just never needed to exist there in the first place, and you've opened up opportunity. So I think Mission Command has been a beautiful vignette that's also allowed us to change how we write requirements. We typically were too fixed in our requirements, even with hardware specifications listed because of some challenge when it comes to swap, whereas we now have a greater aperture that we can be looking at. And so this moves from hard requirements to more objectives, metrics that help us understand that we've achieved those objectives, and really giving space for PEOs to work with their customers. We just talked about the customer experience execution order that came out, like the executive order that came out. Like we have to be incentivized to care about the customer experience. And so making it so that teams don't look at upstream requirements too hard, but look at downstream engagements with their customers helps make that customer experience even better. And only, in my opinion, drives better value for the mission.
Love the idea of the scale, not only horizontal, which is typically how we look at it, and then talk about vertical is impressive. Yvonne, how about over at Red Hat? Would you like to give us an example that you'd like to shine the light on a program that has unlocked some of this capability for operators?
Well, we're with agencies all across federal, state, and local government in support of their cloud initiatives, but we've heard several people talk today about their shared service strategy. So a multi-tenant service that they're providing across the enterprise. And so I'll call out to another example in DoD because I have a ton of respect for Sharon Woods at DISA. A shout out to another woman in technology as well. But I think she has a really thoughtful approach to how she's providing services for the warfighter, which I really love. I think the idea that government has to provide services that are commercially competitive, calling back to just now the conversation about having the customer experience be on par, you really have to run that shared service kind of like a business. You do the market research, you understand where there are capability gaps that you can capitalize on, and really partner with industry to bring that value to DoD. So, I mean, for example, if there's a certain service or capability that doesn't exist in a managed fashion, right at the right accreditation level for the DoD or DHS to be able to leverage it, how can government partner with vendors to make that service available and solve a common problem for many, and potentially do it in a way that addresses security issues that may have arisen from doing like bespoke implementations. And so even thinking through like a marketing and outreach plan as part of your shared service, I think that's in those ways, she's very insightful about how she's leading that group. And I look forward to their continued success.
And boy, talk about having to operate at scale is super impressive. All right, we're going to take another short break and we'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about cloud computing at Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security. And we're talking about specific programs. Louis, I'm going to throw it over to you at the Navy. You top-lined a lot of different activity that's going on there. Would you like to highlight one program that sort of unlocked this capability for your community?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Paul said, I'm going to come back to the flank speed tenant for a moment, but highlight a different aspect. So it's best known as the Office 365 solution that we brought online after CVR was decommissioned.
Okay.
And that's unlocked a lot of capability in terms of collaboration and shifting us out phone conferences and phone bridges and VTCs into a digital native collaboration space that we're still, learning to fully exploit. But that's not the only thing that it got us. Putting aside the productivity applications, the cyber defense and cyber awareness capabilities are very strong. They really transformed the way our Navy cyber operations defense group does business. Because for the first time, especially as we've modernized our endpoint monitoring and compliance, we have near real-time telemetry, very rich identity attributes that are coming in. So not only is the horizontal scale and the vertical scale increase, but the types of things that they can look at and the automation. Because when we talk about scale, like I said before, you can't really scale agility up, but we can automate. We can talk about cattle and not pets. And so when we bring the right tools into place and we modernize the business processes to get at that automation, it can really be transformative. So for the cyber defense folks, when there was, first there's just the awareness, seeing a lot more configurable alerts, potential positives, things like that. The time to respond and being able to trace precisely which node in the information environment is triggering is orders of magnitude better. The reduction in time and effort. I mean, the previous dynamic was literally flyaway teams and talking about days or weeks of teams of people going over and touching things physically with their fingers. And now, obviously the vast majority of that can be automated. So the cost to do what we did before greatly reduced, the ability to do more greatly increased. And I think that comes back to a lot of the discussions on what's the business case for cloud. People still trot out cost savings. And I say, maybe there's a cost basis savings, but there's also a massive mission backlog of stuff that we're supposed to do that we can't do. So you're not going to harvest that cost basis savings. You're going to reinvest it and get to where you actually want to be from a mission performance level. And that's what we've seen with cyber defense.
Sure. I mean, yeah, the value of opportunity cost is endless in this case. That's for sure. Dave, you see this capability again striped across a variety of agencies. Would you like to highlight one for the listening audience here?
Sure, and I'll go back to my platforms kind of theme for the day. And Luke, as you know, TSA is kind of near and dear to my heart. So the TSA Serve You program, human capital program over at the agency for hiring and all employee management functions, right? So what the TSA was able to do over there is use the best of breed kind of SaaS platforms for what they're good for, right? So advertising jobs out to TSOs, potential TSOs, recruiting, hiring, those kinds of things, Salesforce. They deploy the app in Salesforce. That's how they do recruiting and hiring that. The processing of employee actions once you're hired from hire to retire is a complex workflows. You heard Jonathan talking about ServiceNow and its ability to handle complex workflows. That's a ServiceNow application. And what they were able to do is deploy both of those applications with a AWS-based backend to handle the telemetry coming from them saying, hey, we just hired this employee. That's an important event. Comes to the AWS backend, gets processed in the data lake, and then gets put into ServiceNow for any other employee action. So what TSA was able to do, and they've sped up their hiring a lot, was use the best of breed kind of SaaS platforms or PaaS platforms, even in this case, to solve that use case.
Fantastic use case, and I love the adoption of the merging of the technologies from tip to tip there. Shane, how about at Citizenship and Immigration Services? A lot of different use cases there. Give us one example.
I think the most recent one, people tend to think of immigration as fairly static in terms of its implementation by law and statute, things like that. And there's some truth to that.
Until there's 12 policies that change, right?
Exactly. Or political world events change.
Okay.
With recent ones being Afghanistan and Ukraine. Both times USCIS was called into action with very, very limited time notice. And in fact, I think with Ukraine, we were told start to finish, we needed to deploy an entirely new workflow to ingest a series of 16,000 applications coming in from Ukraine alone, and we had 10 days to do it. Now, this workflow was not a simple form. It was far more than that. It had to have all the logic built into it. It had to be able to reach out to multiple systems, not just within our enterprise, but across to other enterprises. It had to make decisions based on that information, and then adjust that workflow accordingly. So there's a tremendous amount of logic, like real-time logic, that needed to be there. Start to finish, we did it in 8 days. So, wow, the kind of capabilities that USCIS brings to bear, a lot of it's just based on long experience with Agile and DevOps and how we approach problem setting. But I can honestly say when they first dumped this on us, the first response you got from anybody in USCIS was like, oh yeah, we can do that. It's that kind of can do, will do attitude that we have really come to see that cloud enables. There's a few problems that we haven't been able to solve that cloud doesn't provide some level of backing for us to do it under. Things that we just simply couldn't have done. We never could have done something like this 10 years ago.
Right.
Years.
And really unlock it at the speed that you're talking about, the velocity.
It really is that velocity and the ability to scale it. Because it's not just about the workflow, it's about the number of people who are going to be hitting the system that we weren't used to before. On an average month, USCIS sees externally about 16 million people or so hitting our systems in different forms of fashion. That's kind of our service community, if you will, plus all of our internal clients, our internal users. So, for us though, that's just a normal day of doing business. So even though this is a massive spike in load on us, honestly, the cloud, the way we scale, the way we were able to, push out the various services and functions across the various, service account or services and platforms that we utilize, it was a normal day. It's like, oh yeah, we did that. Now let's go back and do something else.
Yeah, just be able to lean on that framework that you all worked so hard on putting together so that you could be ready for a situation like this.
Absolutely.
We're gonna wrap it up, and we always like to talk about sort of the future. And who better to start us off than Yvonne? You all at Red Hat have been there since the beginning of this journey on adopting this technology, extensive private sector and public sector capabilities. What's it look like in 2 to 3 years? What's that demand signal that you all are focusing on and are going to be implementing over the course of the next 2 and 3 years?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2 or 3 years. I think that honestly, recession is top of mind for everybody in the tech industry right now. Every morning we're waking up to news of hiring freezes and layoffs. And obviously our heart goes out to those individuals. But in the macro, it makes me think about how that could impact the mission of government. Will this slow innovation? Will we see a brain drain in tech that makes us fall behind the technological capabilities of our foes? So it's not just the people, right? It's we've been in several years of boom in tech, and we've seen a proliferation of small companies and startups, and that's going to be really tough for these next few years in terms of the recession. And so there's risk there as well. I do think there is a silver lining in this, and I think there's an opportunity for us to drive cloud adoption. It's imperative for government to have a cloud-enabled workforce. And it's been really difficult to do that because of the fluidity and inflation in the tech job market over these past few years. Maybe if we're deliberate about recruiting from some of these folks that are unfortunately affected, folks could have an opportunity to serve their country and bring some of that innovation to government. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for me, and maybe a place where we could be deliberate about doing cross-pollination between industry and government. As for Red Hat's focus, I think we are very much zeroed in on edge. Obviously much of what DoD does is edge in some fashion, and we've been a longstanding partner in supporting that. But we're doing some really exciting things lately, like getting OpenShift and Kubernetes up in the International Space Station. We've been working really closely with the integrator community on AI/ML at the edge. Lockheed Martin's created a drone, for example, that not only does image processing on board, but they can actually deploy new models in flight to adapt to their context. So there's a lot of tremendously exciting stuff that's happening at the edge. And the one thing that also really excites me about edge is it's inherently an ecosystem play, right? It requires hardware vendors, software vendors, integrators, and government to collaborate around a single use case to bring these solutions to bear. And so I think that's great. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team, and I think coming together to collaborate to give the best advantage to protecting our country is something that I'm looking forward to. So
the promise is endless. I really do appreciate it. David, how about at Deloitte Consulting? Paint the picture 2 to 3 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, Yogi Berra said it right. It's tough to make a prediction, especially about the future, right? So I love the outer space Kubernetes. Right? That's awesome. ML, Edge, they're all on my list. Stuff we expect, I think. Something I will throw out there that I'm starting to keep my eye on, and object storage has gotten so fast in its latency, right, that I wonder, right, what that does to the database management industry, right? So I can do schemaless queries across a vast array of object storage with very, very low latency right now. Why am I reformatting things into a data warehouse structure that I don't need, right? That's an interesting thing I want to keep an eye on. And I know AWS has made a lot of advances there in their S3 network. The normal stuff, I get edge, machine learning at the edge. And then I think I'm going to keep an eye on the database technology, and just because that's getting so fast.
Good catch there, Jonathan. You all have rolled out a tremendous amount of capability there.
Mhm.
What can we expect 2 to 3 years from now in regards to the capability that'll be unlocked and enabled using your platform?
So I think the overarching story is going to be platforms of all kinds. And
Mhm.
as David noted, more and more
Great example
agencies
there.
are utilizing platforms. But what are they going to be doing on the platforms? I think there's going to be, I think we're going to see low code application development be the norm for agency mission applications of a certain kind, right? There's a level of complexity where maybe you need to build something from scratch, but many of the applications I worked on during my career are things that are based on workflow that can be built using low code tools. The challenge for CIOs, I think, is to have good guardrails and governance as these tools stand up and they're presented out to a program office to use. So, there's comfort that things will be developed in a way that they can be managed well over time. And I think you add to that low code movement, this idea of hyper automation, bringing different technologies together on a platform like ServiceNow, again, to interact in a way that they can't as their standalone technologies. So you have something like RPA, you have workflow, you have AI. You put these together on the ServiceNow platform and you can really automate business processes end to end. And to the extent that we have to focus our employees on different tasks as the environment changes, as government requirements change, the more automation of the simple things, I think that's a very positive trend. And I think we're not taking away people's jobs. We're getting people focused on more important work, the most important work of an agency. And we can do that on ServiceNow today. And I think over the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see more and more situations where agency leaders turn to ServiceNow and hyperautomation and low code. So IT workers or workers in the agency can focus on the most important tasks that they have at hand, which is serving the mission, supporting people during what we expect to be a very challenging time for the country.
Citizen development du jour, no question about that. Louis, how about at the Navy? If I'm coming out of the Naval Academy, I'm a freshly minted sailor, et cetera, what am I going to expect to see in a couple of years?
Well, I think the first thing is to really fully unlock the promise of cloud at scale. We talked about how that needs to be through empowering folks at a low level to do what they need to do and having easy access, automation, small batch capability. I'm not as concerned with particular technologies as I am with the culture of technology adoption. And we've really been pushing the use of technology investment horizons to say a lot of our arguments about optimization and what's prioritized and what's valuable are really this Horizon 1 stuff that we're already doing at scale, or the things that have improbably survived prototype and pilot to be on the brink of Horizon 1. We don't talk a lot about the different care and feeding we need for those Horizon 2 items going across the valley of death and transition that are promising, but we don't know how scaled they'll get. And the Horizon 3 activity where you're seeing these new technologies and business processes come in are almost in their own ecosystem that's really disconnected from the rest. And very rarely do we actually talk about Horizon 0, which our CFOs love, about what you're going to turn off, whether that's a cost avoidance or cost savings. So that strategic portfolio view about we always have new technologies we want to experiment with, and we really want to shine a bright, nurturing light on those Horizon 2 items to get them into Horizon 1. That's a big shift for us. We've typically not had all those value ends. If I had to make one prediction, though, it would be that we're going to see this shift under Zero Trust start to mature, that we're not going to have digital platforms built around networks. We're going to have them built around identity and data. As others have said, really micro-segmented, robust data rights, digital rights management, data loss prevention, attribute-based access control, so that we stop starting our conversations about network diagrams and really focus on who are you, what rights do you have, whether you're a person or a non-person entity, and how do we ensure that a wide range of data, potentially very significant data, are fused or exposed to you in the right way at the right time.
All the accoutrements that architecture affords us. Thank you for that. And thank you for your service. Dr. Lucas, One thing that you all did do is you shut down a data center, as you were describing. You're implementing all these various cloud capabilities. Where are you going to be at the Department of Homeland Security 3 years from now?
I think what's going to happen, Luke, is as we make the more strategic decisions to use those cloud environments, is we're going to start seeing an abstraction of infrastructure layer everywhere. And folks are going to stop talking about infrastructure across the board. And it's just going to be about services. I mean, a lot of times people use government services and the systems may be clunky or they may not work appropriately. But as we continue to innovate in the cloud, that seamless transition to the technology to stay at the speed of implementation will actually help us to deliver that for the customers. I think what's inevitably going to happen positively for the taxpayer in this nation is you're going to start seeing services being focused on rather than the systems. And I think that's going to be a fundamental shift from what we have.
Appreciate that and appreciate all your service as well. Shane, you all have been focusing on that operator, that user, that benefit seeker for quite some time now. What can we expect 3 years from now? What's it going to look like?
Well, first, I agree with all the things my fellow panelists have said. I think that those are all really great points. It's hard to predict the future, but I can tell you what USCIS is focused on, primarily to solve problems, what we see, the problems we're faced with today and the ones we perceive coming at us for the next few years. I really do see the rise of quantum computing to be a significant game changer. Not just, there's been a lot of talk about it from the security perspective about it, how it can crack encryption and all these things, but I also see the value add that it has with dealing with vast quantities of data. And immigration is a vast quantity of data. We are already looking to quantum technologies and how we can leverage that, and where we're going to go with that technology. It really does offer us a better way of doing business, a faster way of doing business. And it's going to be able to allow us to do things that we currently are kind of restrained by, just given the data lakes that we deal with. I think if I'm also looking, obviously edge computing has been mentioned several times. For USCIS, that's even more so. The vast majority of the world lives in rural areas. And a good number of those people, we don't service the American people as much as we service the world because of the nature of our mission. And so we have to really think about that, and how do we take the services and the access that we need to provide these people as part of our mission set and get it into their hands, literally. So that edge computing, the ability to leverage and get the computing into their hands and getting it closer to them, is going to be really critical. If I'm putting my CISO hat back on, I see secure access service edge being a really critical component. Talked a little bit about security in this conversation today, but I've tried to not just talk about my day job. So, but it is going to be, it is for us now a very critical piece for how we deliver services and how we go approach problem setting, especially on the IT security side. And the final thing I'm going to bring up, and I think that it's been talked about a little bit, but again, it goes back to the 16 million or so people that we service every month. We need to make sure we start putting, getting them access so they don't have to route all the way back to, a central location in Northern Virginia. We need to get cloud regions pushed out. And so we're leveraging things more closely to our end users. It's something we're exploring now. It solves a number of problems, not just the data access thing from a cyber resilience piece. It is really, really where we need to be. Very difficult to do. I'm going to be honest about that. But it is something that we're focused on. I know that is going to be part of our future.
Appreciate that, Shane, and appreciate everything that you do for us. Paul, you're going to take us home at the U.S. Army here. And I thought it was a great catch that you've laid out a framework. You don't have to predict a future on the desktop, for example. 2 to 3 years from now, what are you expecting in regards to this journey that you're on to unlock this capability for all the soldiers out there?
Yeah, I'll probably double down on the you don't need to predict the future piece. I think of the quote whenever I hear this question of William Gibson of the future is here, it's just not very evenly distributed. And I think it's our job to break down those barriers to make it more evenly distributed, right? I could try and take a swing at the next 2 to 3 years. I'll tell you what I hope to be the case. I'll tell you the goals. The goals is that the people responsible for implementing this technology understand the opportunity with that technology, why that technology makes sense for the problem that they have, and what outcome they're trying to achieve with that technology. We can talk about, we're implementing a SASE capability as well. We're talking about Open Cloud capabilities. We're talking about our ability to lean into data as a strategic asset. But if we don't understand that there is a mindset and a skill set challenge that we have today, right, we're not going to realize that future, or it'll be so unevenly distributed. Just the few that get it will be able to lean into it, but this value needs to permeate across the entire federal government. And so that's what I think are the biggest challenges that we can do today, that we can essentially unpack today, is understanding that there is a skill set and a mindset challenge, right, of what could be, not just what works, but why it works, right? One of my favorite books when I was growing up is The Way Things Work. Bought it for my kids. And it's not just to, driving a car from here to there, but why does this thing work the way that it works? How does it have value? When we talk about the vast landscape of technology that's out there, we need to understand why it works for the problems that it's solving. And only then in 2 to 3 years can we see people truly leveraging the value of data as a strategic asset, truly see interoperability where it doesn't matter where you go, you can have online on-demand data and services wherever you go. Customer experiences are amazing. People have a product mindset when they deliver capabilities across the DoD. We have quick lead times between ideas to fielded solutions that demonstrate value for the mission. People and our skill sets and our mindsets are the things that's going to unlock that opportunity in the future. So that's where I hope we go.
Really looking forward to that promising future. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules today to join us on this program, both the federal executives here and our partners together fighting the good fight. So I really do appreciate that. I'd like to thank the sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd also like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.